Dean Martin was halfway through singing "That's Amore" when he stopped. It wasn't because he forgot the words or his voice gave out. He stopped because he saw something at the back of the Copa Room that made him realize he had to make a big choice. The band kept playing for 3 more bars before they slowly stopped in confused quiet. 2,400 people looked at each other, not sure what was going on. Dean stood in the middle of the stage, microphone in hand, staring toward the back exit where 2 security guards were walking an older black man toward the door. The man wasn't fighting back. He was just leaving quietly, the way he'd probably left many rooms before. And Dean Martin, the king of cool, the guy who never let anything mess up a show, did something that could either end his career in Las Vegas or change it forever. To understand what happened next, you need to know about Las Vegas in 1962. Las Vegas in 1962 wasn't the family fun place it would become years later. It was a playground for grown-ups with money. And it had rules that everyone knew but nobody talked about out loud. The shiny hotels on the Strip, like the Sands, the Flamingo, the Tropicana, they all had one thing the same. They were segregated. Not with official signs. There were no whites-only signs. Nevada didn't do it that way. But the rules were clear. Black performers could be the stars of the shows, but they couldn't eat in the hotel restaurants. They could sing on stage to full crowds, but they couldn't sleep in the rooms upstairs. They could entertain white audiences for 2 hours, but they couldn't play in the casinos after. Sammy Davis Jr. performed a lot at the Sands. So did Nat King Cole. So did Lena Horne. They were big stars. They brought in huge crowds. But when the show ended, they went out the back door and drove across town to the West Side, the part of Las Vegas where black people were allowed to live. The casino owners wanted black talent. They just didn't want black customers. It was a system full of pretending. And everyone knew it. Performers knew it. Audiences knew it. Management knew it. And if you wanted to work in Las Vegas, you followed the rules. Period. But there was one member of the Rat Pack who hated these rules for personal reasons. Dean Martin understood prejudice in a way most entertainers in Las Vegas didn't. He'd grown up in Steubenville, Ohio, the son of Italian immigrants. His father, Gaetano Crocetti, had been a barber who faced discrimination for being Italian, for having an accent, for being different. Dean remembered what that felt like. He remembered being called Dago as a kid. He remembered watching his father work twice as hard as anyone else just to be accepted. He remembered the quiet anger his father kept inside. That background gave him something. A real understanding of what it meant to be on the outside looking in. His friendship with Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't just for work. It was real. Sammy stayed at Dean's house when he came through Los Angeles. They talked late into the night about race, about prejudice, about how silly the Vegas rules were. Dean hated the system. He hated watching Sammy get standing ovations and then get walked out the back door like he was nobody. But Dean had a family to support, a wife, kids, people who depended on him. So he played along. He performed at the segregated hotels. He smiled for the cameras. He stayed quiet. Everyone in Vegas understood. You didn't make trouble. You didn't challenge the system. You survived by knowing your place and staying in it. By 1962, though, Dean Martin was big enough that he didn't have to stay quiet anymore. September 12, 1962. 7:30 p.m. Dean got to the Sands for his evening show. He was in his dressing room fixing his bow tie in the mirror when his assistant Jackie Romano came in. Jackie looked uncomfortable. "Dean, there's a problem." Dean didn't look up. "What kind of problem?" "Security is taking someone away from backstage." Older guy. He was just sitting near the loading dock, not bothering anyone. Dean turned around. "So why are they taking him away?" Jackie paused. "He's black, Dean. Management says he doesn't have permission to be back here." Dean walked out of his dressing room down the hall toward the loading area. 2 security guards in Sands uniforms were standing with an older black man, maybe 70 years old, wearing a worn but clean suit. The man wasn't arguing. He was just nodding, accepting whatever they said. "What's going on?" Dean asked. One of the guards turned. "Mr. Martin, nothing to worry about. Just removing someone who shouldn't be here." Dean looked at the older man. Really looked at him. Who are you? The man met his eyes. Willie Hayes, sir. I used to play piano here at the Sands back in '52 when it first opened. Just wanted to see the old place again. He doesn't have a ticket, the guard said. House rules, Mr. Martin. You know how it is. Dean knew exactly how it was. He'd known for years. He looked at Willie Hayes, at the giving up look in the man's eyes, at the way he stood there accepting it, and Dean felt something tight in his chest. Let him stay backstage. He's not hurting anyone. The guard's face didn't change. Can't do that, Mr. Martin. You know the policy. Dean knew the policy. How long until showtime? 20 minutes, Jackie said quietly. Dean nodded slowly. He wanted to say more, wanted to fight it, but the guards were already walking Willie toward the exit. And Dean had a show to do. He watched them go. Then he turned back toward his dressing room. Jackie followed him. Dean, you okay? Dean didn't answer. He wasn't okay, but he went on stage anyway. Dean was halfway through That's Amore when he saw Willie Hayes again. The security guards were walking him through the Copa Room, not through the backstage hall, through the audience area, past the tables, past the bar, making a point. The audience didn't notice. They were laughing, drinking, enjoying the show. But Dean noticed, and Ken Lane, his pianist, noticed the way Dean's voice had gone flat. The band kept playing, but something was wrong. Dean sang the next verse without feeling. His eyes followed Willie as the guards guided him past the side tables, past the back booths, toward the rear doors. Willie kept his head down, trying to be invisible the way he'd probably learned to be invisible his whole life. A waiter hurried over to Dean's manager, Herman Citron, who was standing in the wings. Herman wrote something on a cocktail napkin and sent it to the stage. Ken Lane got it during the next music break. He passed it to Dean. The note said, "Finish the show. Don't make trouble." Dean looked at the note. Then he looked at Willie Hayes almost at the exit now. Then he looked out at the audience. 2,400 people who had no idea what was happening, who didn't see Willie, who never saw people like Willie. Dean thought about Sammy, about talks they'd had late at night, about dignity, about what it cost to stay quiet, about how many times Dean had watched this happen and said nothing. Ken Lane saw Dean's face change. He'd played piano for Dean for 5 years. He knew that look. He leaned closer, still playing. Dean, whatever you're thinking, don't. But Dean was done thinking. He stopped singing in the middle of a word. The band played for 2 more bars before stopping into silence. The Copa Room went quiet. Not slowly. All at once. 2,400 people stopped talking, stopped drinking, stopped moving. They stared at the stage where Dean Martin stood in silence, microphone hanging at his side. The band members looked at each other. Ken Lane had his hands frozen over the piano keys. The drummer held his sticks in midair. The bassist's fingers hovered over the strings. Nobody knew what was happening. Dean walked to the front of the stage. His steps were slow and sure. He looked toward the back of the room where Willie Hayes was being walked toward the exit. The security guards had stopped moving. They could feel it, the whole room watching. Someone in the audience coughed. It sounded loud in the quiet. Herman Citron stood in the wings, his face pale. He couldn't stop Dean, not without making it worse. The casino manager appeared beside him, whispering fast, "Get him back on track now." But Dean wasn't getting back on track. He raised the microphone slowly. His voice came clear through the room. "Folks, we have a situation here." The audience whispered. A woman near the front leaned toward her husband. "Is he sick? What's wrong?" Dean ignored the questions. He was looking at Willie Hayes. The old man had stopped walking. The guards still had him by the arms, but they weren't moving anymore. Everyone was frozen, waiting. "I want to tell you about someone," Dean said. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 2,400 people waited to hear what Dean Martin would say next. "That gentleman being walked out," Dean said, pointing toward Willie Hayes. "His name is Willie Hayes. He played piano at this hotel when the Sands first opened in 1952. Before most of you ever heard of Las Vegas, before the Rat Pack, before Dean Martin was playing sold-out shows in this room, Willie looked up surprised. The guard's hands tightened on his arms. Dean went on, "Mr. Hayes also served in the army, fought in World War II in Italy. Came home and helped build the entertainment scene that made this city what it is." The audience was quiet. Some people were starting to get it. Others were still confused. "He came here tonight just to see the old place again," Dean said. His voice was calm. "Just stating facts. And he's being asked to leave. I want to know why." The casino manager stepped forward from the wings. Mr. Martin, we can talk about this after the show. Dean didn't look at him. No, we're going to talk about it now. He looked back at Willie Hayes, at the two guards holding his arms, at the whole room watching. I don't perform in places that treat people this way. He started walking off stage. The room exploded with sounds. Whispers, gasps. Herman was waving wildly at the casino manager. The manager looked at the audience, at Dean, at Willie Hayes. He thought fast. Wait, the manager said, his voice tight. Mr. Hayes can stay. We are sorry for the misunderstanding. Dean stopped. He turned around slowly. Thank you. He walked back to the middle of the stage, picked up the microphone, smiled at the audience like nothing had happened. Now, where were we? The clapping started. Not small, not just polite. A big wave of it growing. They weren't clapping for the music. They were clapping for what had just happened. After the show, Dean found Willie Hayes sitting on a crate near the loading dock. He was alone. The guards were gone. Dean sat down beside him. You okay? Willie nodded. I appreciate what you did, Mr. Martin, but you didn't have to do that. I didn't want to cause problems. You didn't cause problems, Dean said. And call me Dean. He lit a cigarette. You shouldn't have to be thankful for basic respect. They sat quiet for a moment. Willie looked at his hands. I played with Count Basie's band, Willie said. 1948 to 1951, best years of my life. When the Sands opened in '52, they hired me for the house band. Paid well too for a while. What happened? New management came in. 1954. They wanted a different look. Willie smiled, but there was no happiness in it. So, they let me go. I understood. That's how it works. Dean shook his head. That's not how it should work. Maybe not, Willie said. But you said something tonight. That's what matters. Herman Citron appeared in the doorway. Dean, the casino manager wants to talk. Dean stood up. Tell him Willie Hayes has a lifetime pass to any show I do at the Sands, front row seat if he wants it. He looked at Herman. And if they have a problem with that, they can find a new headliner. Herman nodded and left. Willie stood, held out his hand. Thank you, Dean. Dean shook it. I should have done this years ago. By the next morning, everyone in Las Vegas knew what had happened at the Sands. The story spread through the entertainment world like wildfire. Performers talked about it backstage. Dealers whispered about it between shifts. Some people were inspired. Some casino owners were mad. Did anything change? Not right away, not in a big way, but small changes started. The Sands quietly loosened some of its backstage rules. Other hotels noticed. Within 6 months, a few places started letting black people in areas that had been off limits before. Not because they wanted to, because they had to keep up with the competition. Willie Hayes got a job teaching piano at a music school on the West Side. Dean made sure he had tickets to every show at the Sands for the rest of his life. Willie used most of them, always sat in the front row. Dean kept performing in Vegas for another 15 years, but he used his power differently after that night. Small acts of standing up, quiet pushing for treating people with respect, nothing that made big news, everything that mattered to the people it helped. Years later, when someone asked Dean about September 12, 1962, he shrugged it off. I just stopped a show. Anyone could have done it. But Sammy Davis Jr. saw it differently. He was quoted as saying, Dean didn't just stop a show that night. He stopped pretending he didn't see what was happening. That takes more courage than people realize. That night didn't change Las Vegas right away. The Civil Rights Act was still 2 years away. Real change would take time, but it changed Dean Martin. And for Willie Hayes sitting in the front row watching his friend perform, it changed.